Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, where I, Anna Williscroft, chat with fellow writers and outdoor enthusiasts about how we can embrace creativity and curiosity to live a life full of adventure that doesn't feel like hard work. I delve into exploratory conversations about my two loves in life, writing and nature connection, as part of my mission to share the well-being benefits they both bring. It's wonderful to have you here today. In this episode, I chat with Dean Palfreyman about the ancestral health approach to nutrition, real food, natural movement, and how fasting can be hugely beneficial. Hello, Dean. Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast. I'm very excited to chat to you today because I saw you talking at a pop-up wellness event, business and wellness event. Cracky, I bet it was a couple of months ago now, but you intrigued me with your approach, which we're going to talk about today. So Dean, just for the listeners, you've worked in the health and fitness industry for 20 years. You started as a gym instructor, you've been a personal trainer, class instructor, gym manager, and now you run your own business, Primal Nutrition and Fitness, which is where you've been for the last 6 years. So welcome to self-employment.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, that's pretty much
that's you.
That's my 20 years, yes.
Yeah. So Dean, you talk about being trained in the mainstream approach to health and fitness, but over the years you've sort of you don't necessarily agree with that method. So to kick off the episode, and before we dive into your current approach, which is ancestral health and more of a holistic approach, could you explain a little bit about what this mainstream approach is and why you think for most people it's not necessarily the right way for them to go?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, yeah, the term mainstream, and what I mean by that is it's most people get to hear that type of information. And it's been ongoing since kind of the dawn of when we started having health and fitness advice. And the bottom line is when we break any of the methods down, it comes down to calorie restriction, particularly avoiding fat within your diet, and then exercising as much as you possibly can. And the magic pill would be that you'd be fit and healthy just doing that. So take your calories away, exercise more, and you'll be fit and healthy. Yeah. And that is the mainstream advice, and that is what is still now. If anybody wanted to be a trainer themselves, if you went online, got yourself booked on a course, that would pretty much be the way you'll be trained to approach people.
Yeah.
And I found, though, that of course that's how I was trained. And in my early career, that was what I was delivering to people that wanted my help. And back then, I had no other kind of reason to think it wasn't going to work. But guess what? It wasn't.
It wasn't.
Not I say it wasn't. It was in some cases. But what really doesn't happen is it doesn't stick. It doesn't last long term. You may get kind of early doors results, but actually you'll find that it only lasts for so long. People plateau, and of course that's when they go back and they think, what's it all about? And why are we even bothering?
They have a bit of a yo-yo effect.
Correct, yeah. So they go up and down. I mean, if we're only talking about weight, weight goes down, weight goes up. It's that, like you say, that yo-yo effect that people have. And that comes from not just weight, but all the other positives of exercising. They'll feel great for a while, but then they'll fall off the wagon because they haven't got the motivation, or they don't enjoy it. But yeah, so when I look back, as I say, I was kind of doubting myself in that why weren't these people getting the results we were expecting? So I had a couple of questions in my mind. Was I a bad trainer? I always say this, it could have been me. I wasn't doing it. Were those people lying to me? The clients, how's your diet been this week? Oh, great. Have you been exercising? Yeah, 3 or 4 times. They could have been lying. But actually, when I found my light bulb moment, let's say, I realized it wasn't those. It was actually that I was giving the wrong advice. Giving that mainstream advice that just doesn't work long term. And that led me down the route of, as you already highlighted, the ancestral approach.
Yeah. So how did you come across this approach, Dean? And in relation to health, what kind of, because you talk about it leading you to a light bulb moment, and everything that you've done ever since is kind of following this pattern. So yeah, give us a little bit of an intro. How did you come across it, and what kind of things can people expect if they, embrace this approach?
Well, I was actually given a book by one of my clients. Is a lady, she was in her 60s, just came to me and just wanted to keep herself fit and healthy. She said, I've got a hold of this book, you might want to read it. And it was called, but you can still get it now, The New Evolution Diet. And it was by a guy called Professor Art Devaney. And it was the first book I ever read and then read again straight away. I read it back to
Right.
back twice. And like I say, it was kind of that light bulb moment, because it made me go, well, hang on a minute, that makes so much sense. It's not this mainstream approach. Let's look at a different angle. And I think we get pulled down that in many walks of life, don't we? We get told one thing, we don't look outside the box.
Yeah, we take that as it being a given, and that's what we need to follow. And
Yeah,
that there is that is a way, there is no other way. Yeah, we don't
yeah,
question things, particularly if it's coming from an authoritative source as well. You just, tend to believe that that's the right way.
absolutely, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I haven't just taken this book and go, right, this is the gospel of health and fitness. And there's actually a few things in that now when I look back that have changed since then.
Yeah.
But what it led me to do is actually then think, right, this is a great idea. It makes a lot of sense to me. So let's experiment on myself. So that was stage one. I took it only on myself. I didn't just roll it out to all the people I was working with. But I actually found I started to feel better. I felt my fitness is improving. Then I started to experiment, of course, with clients, and then I started to get results, and that led me down all the rabbit holes of the books. Pretty much everything I've read since then has been around um, this subject. All
Yeah.
the nutrition information. And again, it's not about taking that one thing and going, that is going to work 100% for everybody, but actually finding that I use it as a basic template from the food
Yes.
point of view, from the exercise point of view. That's the basic template. And then we work on an individual basis to see what works for that individual person.
Mm.
Some people maybe they need more fat in their diet, they need less carbohydrate, but everybody's different. What works for
Yeah.
me may not work for you, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important, I think, for everybody to always don't go down that kind of dogmatic route of that's what it is, that's what I've been told, let's stick with it. You got to
Mm.
think outside the box, and it works. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose I don't want to do anyone an injustice, but if you're relatively new into the industry, relatively new in training, you're probably going to have some of these mainstream methods because that's what's being taught through the colleges, through the universities, through the specific industry, shall we say. And it's only when you start to question things and you start to get curious about other things, or wonder if there's a different way, or as you said, there wasn't necessarily some results, so you wanted to delve in a little bit more and find something that did work. So what are the main differences then between, say, a kind of standardized approach of less calories in, more exercise, and then the ancestral approach? Because I've always sort of had in the back of my mind that it's 80% diet, or food intake rather than diet, and 20% exercise. And is that right? Is that wrong? Yeah. So yeah, just if you could explain a little bit about the differences, I think that would help people to understand, where the two different approaches are coming from.
Yeah. Well, before I go into the differences, but actually the 80-20 kind of concept there, again, I think, again, it's very individual.
Yeah.
I do think there's a greater percentage to push towards the dietary intake, certainly. It's the cliche statement that you can't outtrain a bad diet. If
Yeah.
you're eating junk all the time, you can't. It's not going to work,
Yeah.
particularly from an overall health perspective. And that's an important element to take. Actually,
Yeah.
it's not just about weight loss; it's
Mm.
about overall health. But yeah,
Yeah, I
so
get that a
again,
lot actually, Dean. Just it may the reason why I was laughing then is because I run quite a lot,
uh,
and a lot of runners think, oh, I've burnt off a load of calories. I can now go and have a burger and a hot sticky toffee pudding, and I'll be absolutely fine. Whereas it doesn't really work like that, does it? You've still got to
no,
eat healthily.
yeah. So yeah, doing the exercise, and I think this is where the mainstream approach kind of comes from. Actually, you can almost mitigate the bad food by some extent by exercising a lot. You know,
Mm.
you run a lot, you can burn. The term burn, I think it gets overused as well. You know, we kind of visualize our bodies as almost like a furnace. That you take something in it and then you burn it off. It's not quite how that works. There's a lot more hormonal regulation and hormonal dysregulation. It's not just a simple case of in it goes, burn it off, and away it goes. And that's
Yeah.
the problem with the mainstream, you know, that calories in, calories out hypothesis, basically.
Mm.
So to go back to your question there, what is the difference there? So it's important just to underpin. So let's take that term ancestral and kind of elaborate in that we are looking back at how our ancestors evolved. Because genetically, we are the same now in the modern world as we were 250, 300,000 years ago at the dawn of modern man when we became Homo sapiens. Our bodies are the same thing.
Yeah.
And the thing that hasn't changed is that, you know, the modern world has changed, but our bodies haven't caught up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably remember I've got this timeline I always like to speak about in that 250, 300,000 years of modern man. Then we have 10 or 12,000 years of agriculture, where we started to become more settled, growing our own food, grain-based food in particular. And then, of course, the modern world, 70, 80 years of really bad advice, really bad then processed foods, all the takeaways, just being able to pick up a phone and have food delivered to your door.
Yeah.
And that phrase I always use, though, we're an ancient being in a modern world, and that's where things are going on. So the whole approach is looking back and trying to emulate as best as we can what our genetics are expecting. In other words, eating real food, moving naturally, not this kind of outsourced gym environment, all bells and whistles, you know, using your body how it's supposed to be used.
So just to clarify there, Dee, when you say using it as we're sort of supposed to and not using outsourced things, so not necessarily loads of weights, you know, machinery, equipment and things like that. It's sort of more of a natural movement without anything else helping us.
Yeah, so there is a place, don't get me wrong, for where machines can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's kind of the fast side though. People that are interested in bodybuilding type exercise, you know, if that's what they want to do, great. But arguably, it's not necessary. It's not a natural state for our body to be excessively muscle. It's not a natural state. But if you want to do that, that's the type of thing you need. You know, these isolated machines. But your body hasn't evolved moving that way. You know, at no point in our ancestral evolution would any of the hunter-gatherers got on their backs and done crunches.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
use a couple of bison as some dumbbells.
Of course, yeah. Or you know, or picked up rocks to do bicep curls. They wouldn't be doing that. They would certainly be doing resistance-based exercise. You know, they would be picking up a bison after they've killed it, you know, slinging it over their shoulder to carry it back to camp. They would be moving materials to make shelters. They would be making tools. So they'd be very physically active, certainly, but not in the same way. Whereas we have to modern world mitigate our lack of movement.
Yeah.
So if somebody sits behind a desk all day, they should be going to the gym or doing a sport or whatever that may be. Because most of the time they're not moving. And that's the difference, mitigating that effect. But actually, our bodies are very well adapted at being, or should I say, moving more often, you know, moving more regularly. I quite often advise to people that when they particularly say, well, I haven't got time to exercise, this concept of like movement snacks, it's a great term. Okay. And maybe you have a snack of food through the day, but at that point you also have a snack of movement. So it could be stand up and out of your chair 5 or 10 times every half an hour. If you do that over the course of the day, you've done 80 to 90 squats without time, energy, you know, anything else. But that's
without really thinking about it, it's just building a habit.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, just like you do might do any small, go make a cup of coffee at break time, lunchtime, do a few push-ups in the kitchen while the kettle boils. You know, all these small snippets can all add up. Going back to the whole movement side of things, yeah, your body is designed to work as a functional unit, not in these isolated planes of, you know, chest press, bicep curls, all these modern environments. They're kind of this commodity. But of course, the modern world, our brains, you know, you walk into that swanky reading gym environment, all the flashing lights, counting your repetitions, apps and things like that, which is all great if it helps people stay motivated. But actually, just getting out, going for a walk in the park, doing a food pull-ups on a tree, walking up a mountain, climbing over boulders. These are how your body's designed to move.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other stuff going on there because we've got the fresh air as well. We've got, I think it ignites our senses a little bit more. So we're more alert, we're more aware, we've got more focus, more energy in general, just from being outside. I mean, we've been outside Saturday and Sunday because we've, for when this episode goes out in a couple of weeks, but we've just had a little mini heat wave, I would say, this weekend. And I've had 2 of the best nights sleep ever, because I've just been outside in the fresh air, moving pretty much both days, the Saturday and Sunday. So there's kind of other knock-on effects, and I wouldn't say that I get that if I would have gone. Well, I don't go to the gym anymore, actually. But going to the gym or just having an energetic run, a solitary run, maybe a blast for half an hour, 45 minutes, doesn't give me that kind of. How would we say it? Like an extra benefit, a hidden benefit almost.
Yeah, it isn't just about the exercise. Like you say, there's other elements, particularly getting outside, massive. The fresh air 100% makes such a difference as opposed to air-conditioned gym environment.
Yeah.
This, like you say, this weekend, what's the one thing we haven't had for a long time? Sunshine.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You get that sun on your skin. We're creating vitamin D, of course. It's the best source of vitamin D. You're out in nature. We have this connection to nature. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't feel better if they go for a walk in the woods or along the beachfront or up in the hills. You get there, there's this kind of innate connection.
Yeah.
And again, this is where we have this disconnect from our physiologies as they evolved in nature to now living in boxes. I think when I spoke to you last, we're moving most of the time from one box to the next. Yeah. We're both sitting in a box now.
Yeah.
If I went to the shop, I'll walk to the car, which is another box, to then go. We live in these boxes, but actually, our world is so much more than a box. It moves, it undulates, it goes down, it goes up, it turns, and I think there's a certain element there as well. We're restricted. When we just look at the 4 walls, I think there's a certain amount of pressure on our body. Again, just it's not natural for us. When you get outside, you look into the distance. When you look out, when you climb through the hills and you get to that next level, and you can see there's almost a release, and I think we miss that.
Yeah, totally on board with you with that. Yeah, I think the 4 walls can be very, very constricting, mentally and physically. And there's just an element of, you're right, release when you're outside. The expansion of your surroundings we've spent the last couple of days we're fortunate we've got some patio doors at the dining room. We've just had them open, so we've let the air come in, and it's been very, very therapeutic, I think, is probably a good word to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fresh, like you just said there, fresh air just coming into the house makes a difference. So get out into the fresh air if you can. If you could, we need to have, certainly, it's really important to try and get that air turnover within our houses. Because you put, with all the off-gassing of furniture, I don't know if you heard about that. Giving off these chemicals, plastics within our house. It's all building up. Not to a toxic level, but is there something undergoing now? I think there is. And of course, you open the windows, you let that get reinvigorated. It feels better in the house.
Yeah, I've not heard of that, and I never ever thought about it, but it does make a lot of sense because it's manufactured artificial fibers and things pretty much in everything that's inside the house, the carpets, the wallpaper. I mean, look at all the hazardous stuff. We've got Artex walls that we're at the moment using gloop to make it, a liquid, so that we don't have the the powder aspect, but we're sort of surrounded by this unnatural stuff everywhere, and what's the best tonic outside? Natural.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not my area of expertise, certainly, but I think there's this definite element within our health issues that it isn't. Certainly, bottom line is food, movement, etc. But I think environment's a massive thing that we're overlooking. We're living in kind of a toxic world in many respects. I think that we don't even realise. We've always got the plastics. We've always got, like you say, the artificial fibres in the air. And I think everyone's, you know, when you bought yourself a new settee, you unwrap it. There's a smell, isn't there? There's a certain smell.
Yeah, yeah. New
That stuff,
cars as well.
yeah, exactly. That is the off-gassing of these things that we're inhaling. I think there's a certain line of thought there that probably not that great for us.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think you've provided a new level of food for thought there. Excuse the pun for
No,
people. So yeah, if we then because one of the things that we've previously spoken about, which I think is possibly relevant to the ancestral approach as well, is the concept of fasting, because you know, we didn't have food readily available for us all the time. As you've said before, you know, you can pick up the phone now, you can get one of the delivery companies. Everything is geared around us just being I can never say this word, sedentary.
That's it.
Is that right?
Yes.
There's a few words that I can never pronounce, and that's one of them. Because it's just convenience and things come to us, and we wouldn't have had that. Our ancestors wouldn't have had that. So, yeah, would you? I mean, this is something that I think a lot of people have probably thought about, tried. Some people swear by it. So, what are your thoughts, Dean, on the concept of fasting and whether that links in any way to the ancestral approach?
Yeah, well, 100% yes, it does. Because your physiology is very well adapted at going without food for periods of time. And the reason that we can do that is, of course, we store body fat.
Yeah.
Body fat is there 4 times of necessity when we didn't have food coming in. And of course, modern world, we're eating 3, 4, 5 times a day in some cases. There's this constant influx of food intake. And going back to the ancestral approach, whenever we had food, our body would lay down body fat, because actually we weren't going to get the hunt the next day or two, or even a week. And that's why fasting is actually our default setting, let's say.
Okay.
And when we are constantly eating, our body, I think I've used this analogy before with yourself, is using what I class as the F1 car fuel.
Yes.
Sugar, basically. So glucose within our bloodstream, stored in the liver as glycogen, as a stored fuel source. It certainly can be used at times when we had to run away from the tiger. But most people are living in this F1 car metabolism, let's say. So we'll get up in the morning, bowl of cereal, blood sugar spike. Halfway through the morning, you're hungry because that energy has come down. You have to go to the pits. You have a snack, you come down, you have your lunch, and zigzag pattern throughout the day. But allowing your body to get away from driving the F1 car allows you to get the driving license to drive what I like to class as the juggernaut lorry. And that fuel tank is your stored body fat. It lets you chug along throughout the day, just like a lorry will go from one end of the motorway to the next without stopping. And if you're constantly driving the F1 car, you're never going to use the juggernaut lorry fuel, that fat. And there's a really simple method of why that's happening. So you've probably heard of insulin, the hormone insulin.
Yeah.
So insulin is released when our blood glucose is risen. So whenever we eat any food, our glucose will go up. And of course, every food has a different glycemic index, as it's known, how quickly that happens. But of course, most people, refined carbohydrates, sugary snacks, they're giving these huge spikes all the time. So when insulin is then produced by the pancreas to come and deal with it, ideally it takes it from the bloodstream, the glucose that is, into the cell for energy production. And if it doesn't do that, particularly if then people are sat down all day, it converts it into fat and stores it on the body, which makes a lot of sense. So when hunter-gatherers would get that meal, we'd eat it all at once. The body would say, great, we've got some energy coming in. Let's store some in, because actually tomorrow we're not. So that kind of insulin cycle that we're in the modern world, we're always on, is constantly storing body fat. It doesn't know that we're not, that we can pop to the fridge or phone a takeaway. So we've still got this survival mechanism, because that's what it is, a survival mechanism in our modern context. That's where things have gone wrong. So using fasting is a really good way of allowing your body to get out of the F1 car and get into driving that wagon. because of course you fast, you don't eat any food, your blood glucose will come down, and your body has to then start to get good at moving into that lorry to get that driving license for that lorry. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like I'm saying to people now, right, stop eating and you're going to feel great, because actually your body, in most cases, you're going to be F1 car driven. It does take a bit of time to create this metabolic switch. When you get good at driving the lorry, though, sometimes you can have some F1 car fuel. You can, it's called metabolic flexibility. You can switch between the two. But it's really important, if that happens, to not keep driving it, because otherwise you just fit straight back into that F1 car. Because it's more exciting, it's easier to metabolize. So that fasting protocol can be really beneficial to help that. And it doesn't work for everybody, and everybody, again, from the start of the conversation, is different. You have to find your own way of doing things. But when it does work, it works really well. I personally, I like to kind of call it self-regulative fasting. In that I think it could go wrong when people will say, right, I'm not going to eat from 8 o'clock till 12 midday the next day. And they get very almost based on the numbers again. I've got to get to 12, I've got to get to 12. 10 o'clock, they're starving. They're like, oh, I'm going to have to make it, and fighting through it. That's when it's not a good way of doing things. But that self-regulation is actually asking the questions: do I feel hungry? Am I energetic? Do I really need to eat? And if that's the case, then why are we eating? That's the thing. We need to be more aware and more mindful of when we're having the food. And if you're thinking of fasting, certainly, maybe set that time period, but don't force it. Let the body work naturally.
Yeah, you've raised sort of a lot of questions there, really, and things that people can think about. I mean, just as you were starting to talk, and you were saying, it's kind of something that's regulatory, something that is quite natural for us from the past. I mean, you only have to look at certain animals now as well. They still have this hibernation process, don't they, over the winter, bears in particular, and they rely on their fat stores to feed them while they're asleep. I mean, granted, a lot of their systems will slow down, they won't need as much energy to sort of function, which we are always on the go. Another thing, we're always on the go, aren't we, in the modern world. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And almost like, for me, I kind of imagine it being a bit of a kind of reset, a cleansing sort of session. I mean, I've always had quite a high metabolism. I've always eaten reasonably well, but I get hungry within 3 to 4 hours, depending on what I eat. If I eat something that's, like the cereal, for example, you say for breakfast, I can't really have cereal for breakfast. I'm hungry an hour and a half later. And to me, that's not the right kind of food for me. Totally understand those sort of peaks and troughs that we would go through. But I think if we are mindful with our eating, and if we just think about, well, what did we do in the past? A lot of this makes absolute sense. And to have those fat stores, and to just delve into them every so often, and use a little bit of them, is not really a bad thing. Because if we're eating the wrong things, and as you say, a lot of people, we sit down at a desk all day, I'm the same, where's it going? It's not being burnt off, is it? We're getting the fat stores, and it's just being added to, and you just visualize that, the F1 car and the juggernaut to get rid of the fuel, but also just thinking about analogy of a jar, just keeps filling up. There's nowhere for it to be released if we're not eating the right things, if we're not exercising in the right way. There's so many elements there, I think, that people need to think about, if I could say need to think about.
I think you're right. And you used that great word there, breakfast. You have breakfast. And obviously, most of the time when people do a fasting type protocol, breakfast is the one to go. And we get a lot of kind of pushback from that, because everyone, of course, is programmed because breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And I think I may have mentioned to you before, where that comes from is actually a marketing slogan, of course, from Kellogg's. To sell their cereals. And I think that term breakfast is breaking the fast. So I do believe breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but it hasn't got to happen at 7:30 in the morning, and it definitely hasn't got to be a bowl of cereal.
Yeah.
You know, you say yourself, if you do have cereal, you're hungry within a couple of hours later. And that's because it's giving you very limited nutrition. It's giving you a blood sugar spike, that F1 car, but actually it burns off pretty quick. You know, in an insulin sensitive person, it's going to be dropping down. So what do you have to do? You have to go and have something else to eat. And there's that exact zigzag pattern again. So yeah, that breakfast certainly most important meal of the day, but it doesn't have to be that time, and it certainly hasn't got to be cereal or carbohydrate based. You know, if people are eating breakfast, I'm a big proponent of more kind of cooked breakfast things. So scrambled eggs, omelets. You know, to some extent, you know, bacon sausage can be okay, but not as a staple, let's say. You know,
Yeah, not every day.
you know, we go down the rabbit hole of the processed foods and so at the end of the day there, but you can get good quality. You know, you quite often with any food, the you pay a premium usually for the good stuff. Not in all cases, but you do.
Yeah, we went to a good example of that is we went to the local farm shop a couple of weeks ago and we got some oat cakes. You're familiar with oat cakes?
I know what an oatcake is.
It's
Yeah.
a Staffordshire, yeah, so it's a Staffordshire thing. So some people might not know what an oatcake is, but it's a bit of a Staffordshire delicatessen. The recipe supposedly very safe, closely guarded, but it's a bit like a very, very thin pancake, but it doesn't really taste like a pancake. But anyway, we thought, oh, let's just have some sausage and tomato oatcakes for breakfast for a change. This was we got them on a Saturday and we had them on a Sunday, but we had these thick sausages and exactly what you've just said. They were expensive, but the quality was definitely there. They were packed with more nutrition than the stuff that you just buy from the supermarket shelves. And we were full I mean, we went for an 8-mile run about an hour and a half after having two oatcakes, two sausages, and a massive tomato. And we didn't have food for another couple of hours or so after we got back. I know that's probably not right because you're supposed to have a bit of protein, aren't you, after you've exercised quite
Yeah.
quite a lot. But yeah, so it just goes to show how much more nutrition and how it feeds your body better to have the quality stuff.
Yeah. I like the term nutrient density. That's
Yes.
that's the whole. We want to be eating nutrient dense food, and again that comes back. You know, the problem with the modern way of eating is a lot of the food we are eating is very nutrient poor.
Yeah.
You know, so cereals as a breakfast, they haven't got a great amount of nutrition. And in fact, most at source haven't got anything in them. They have to be fortified. You know, we see on the boxes, don't be fortified with vitamins, minerals, iron, etc.
Yes.
It's because there's no nourishment in them. It's not that they're not. The company isn't trying to be good to you. They just have to put it in there to sell it. You know, there's rules and regs. They have to be nourishing you. But you know, a lot of the food people are eating hasn't got that nourishment. So we want to have, and that's why the real food ancestral approach works so well, because real food has nourishment and it fuels you well. Like you say, you have those good quality sausages. There's good quality natural fats there. There's the protein. You know, these things are what keep us satiated. These are what tell our body, thank you very much. I've got that nourishment. I don't need to eat again. You can keep, you know, if I give you 100 bags of crisps, you can keep going because there's no nourishment. If I give you a nice piece of meat and some veg, there's only so much you're going to eat because your body actually says, I don't need any more, thanks. Because it knows it's getting fed well.
Yeah.
That's the big difference.
Yeah, and I think paying attention to knowing that you're being fed well as well. I was having a conversation with someone a couple of episodes ago about appetite control and portion control, and she was saying, yeah, just listening to your body and knowing when you're full, because quite often if the food is in front of us, you know, from an etiquette point of view, we want to finish what's in front of us because it would be rude not to. Whereas, you know, we're kind of, it'd be rude to eat it all to our bodies because we actually don't need it all half the time. So just paying attention to when you actually feel full, when you actually feel hungry, rather than it being habitual at certain times as well, which kind of, you know, what you've just said about the breakfast, you know, being the most important meal of the day. And I always remember my grandma used to call it breakfast, and I always just think, why is she calling it breakfast? It's breakfast.
Right.
But she was right. It's breaking the fast, like you say, and that doesn't necessarily have to be before we go to work in the morning or whatever our daily routine might be. And just being more in tune with ourselves, which we would definitely have been as cavemen in our ancestors. You know, we would have been more in tune with when we needed food. It might not have always been there in the same way or in the same form for sure, but at least we were more intuitive, I think, in those days to what we needed.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting you say, you know, the etiquette of if somebody gives you a meal, you'll eat it all because you don't want to displease them. Let's say. I think there's a couple of other lines regarding that. You know, as kids, you know, we're told by parents, eat all your food,
Yeah.
you know, finish your plate. But we're almost driving an overeating mentality there straight away. And also, though, if we put a flip on the head of that, when we did, as ancestors, get that hunt, we would have ate everything as quickly as we could.
Mm.
And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, if you didn't, somebody else would.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to store it because we had no refrigeration and things. And also, that food that we've just eaten could also attract something else that could come and eat you. So we, you know, we want to get rid of it as quickly as we can. And of course, we're not eating it as regularly, so we would, you know, our bodies would be craving it. So I think there's also an element there of it's in front of you, get it down you.
Yeah.
I think
That's
that's
probably in our genes somehow.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely,
I
yeah.
had
But
not thought about that.
but there's the problem. We've got the food all the time.
Mm.
We know that we're having these at least in most cases 3 meals a day.
Mm.
So what do? You eat it all. And then we underpin what we've just said about the nourishment within that food is not there.
Mm.
So of course you're going to eat more. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this vicious cycle. Yeah.
So what's a typical day for you look like, Dean? So when I heard you talk, I seem to remember you saying that you'd had so many pork chops and not much else.
Right.
Well, one of your meals. So what's sort of a typical couple of days intake of food for you?
Right. Okay. Well, usually Monday to Friday, I don't eat breakfast
Hmm.
because I don't feel I need it. Um, I haven't had any this morning. I'll probably have something at kind of lunchtime
Yeah.
if I feel like it. A lunch depend. Of course, it depends where I am. But if I'm working out and about, I'll have taken something pre-prepared, like some cooked meats. When I met you a couple of months ago, that was pork chops cooked the night before, and that was what my lunch was. It filled
Yeah.
me up well, nourished me well, and I carried on for the rest of the day. And then an evening meal again will usually be based around some kind of meat or fish with vegetables, sweet potato fries, you know, cooked steamed veg. That's the basis.
Mm.
Of a weekend, I may have breakfast. I probably won't have it at 7:30, but you know, maybe half 9, 10 o'clock. I might have more of a, let's say, a cooked breakfast that would be more a bit of bacon, sausage, tomato, the standard, without, of course, the toast. I'm not a big fan of bread. I haven't eaten bread personally for 7 years because I know how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
And then again, a standard kind of lunch will be protein as the majority, but then of an evening a bit more of a rounded meal, and that's kind of a standard.
Mm.
If I do ever have any snacks, it would be some nuts, probably, maybe a bit of cheese, sometimes fruit. I'm not a huge fruit fan, just from the taste, really. I'm not a big sweet tooth kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I'd rather somebody was eating a piece of fruit than a Mars bar, of course. But we still have to be considerate on the sugar intake. You know, I think we often overlook that, yes, it's fruit, it's better than the chocolate, it's still sugar once it's inside.
Yeah.
And once we've digested it, it's still glucose. So that's kind of a standard day. It sounds quite boring, but actually it's really it is
Well,
quite basic. It's simple. That's the other thing.
yeah.
It's
But I
simple.
think that's what you say there, it sounds quite boring, but you kind of that's another aspect of modern day eating now. People eat because what's the right way to say this? They don't eat to fuel. They eat because, they like the look of that sundae, that donut, that pizza. It's all made to look very appetizing and rewarding, and we want that food, and we kind of crave the way that it looks, the way that it tastes, rather than just thinking, okay, my body needs energy. I need to eat something because that's how I'm going to get that energy, how I'm going to get the right fuel. So it's almost like we've kind of lost what the basic necessity of eating means.
Yeah, and there's so many layers there. The kind of indoctrination that you should eat 3 meals a day. The the type of food I think is a massive one. You highlighted that. You know, we have these almost cravings for these foods, and that's because they're manufactured to make you crave more.
Yeah.
You know, the perfect example, Pringles. What's their slogan? Once you pop, you can't stop. It's because it's
Yeah.
laden with chemicals to keep going. You know, and a donut is the kind of perfect melting pot for your body to say, "Give me more sugar and fat all at once."
Mm.
It's not a good source of it, but actually your body goes, "Blimey, there's loads of energy there. Get it down me."
Mm.
That's it, and that's why we're driven to it because it stimulates the brain. Your body knows, yes, there's energy there, but you can't have 6 of them. There's only food for you. You know, yeah, you're right. The mindfulness again we come back to of actually thinking, do we need the food? And we probably don't at that point. But it's just so driven in our brain with these modern foods to go and grab it.
Yeah.
So and that's where the big problem of the modern world is. It's always there, and it's not great. It's not
Yeah, it's
nourishing.
always
It's
there,
not,
but
yeah.
it's always the wrong kind of food that's there. You never get a stall, do you, at a fair or anything like that that's selling boiled eggs.
No,
You know, you might eat chocolate eggs maybe, but never a boiled egg.
it's very rare to find anywhere out and about, isn't it? That's actually selling good food. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I even thought Subway was reasonably healthy, which I suppose it is compared to some things. But then I've got a friend who works. She's a lecturer, and she knows a lot about, you know, chemistry and how, you know, components and things are made. And she said that there's some, I mean, I'm not speaking out of term here, I think you can probably find this, but the breads that they use isn't actually classified as a bread
No.
because of what's in it.
Yeah.
I mean,
heard,
that's shocking.
isn't it 1 molecule away from being plastic? I've heard.
Is it? Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Yeah, and because they half cook them on site, don't they? So they need to be turned around quickly. So there's additives, etc., that go into it. Yeah, I mean that's a great thing regarding any kind of sandwich, because Subway's a sandwich shop, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
The stuff that's going in the middle of it is pretty good. You know, you've got your salads, your lettuce, your cucumber, your tomatoes. The meat that they're putting in there probably isn't the best quality, but the stuff that's inside is probably the good stuff. Get rid of the bread, you've probably got a relatively good meal, actually. But when you put it around, like you say, that half molecule away from being plastic bread, it's really not a great choice. Yeah.
It's shocking, isn't it? Yeah, I've got a bread maker, so I do make quite a lot of fresh bread. So I'd
Right.
still make white bread, just because the little one's a little bit unsure about the brown bread. But sometimes I'll do a half and half. But you know, it lasts 2 days, if that. And to me, that's a good thing because I know that, you know, there's only natural stuff that's gone in there, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, as I say, I'm not a huge proponent of bread personally as well. You know, it doesn't make me feel great. It's the asthma symptoms. I just feel tired, lethargic. You know, the digestion's off. But if people do have it, you're doing exactly the right thing. You want to be making it yourself. There shouldn't be more. There's 3 ingredients realistically: flour, yeast, bit of salt, and obviously water to mix it together.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yeah.
As opposed to you look at any off-the-shelf loaf in any supermarket, there's 10 plus ingredients, and half of them you can't pronounce.
You can't pronounce exactly. Yeah, I'd usually look at that if and I tend to now to go for the full fat things because I've looked on the back of a lot of packaging, and if it's got, you know, low fat or it's a low percentage of fat, there's stuff in there that I've not heard of. Whereas if it's the full fat version, it's just the natural stuff. There's nothing that I can't pronounce in there.
Yeah.
So I figured, although yes, there's probably more fat content, it's actually healthier for me.
Yeah, and that's another interesting thing. You know, we're the fat phobic society that we live in because of the advice we've been given since the 1980s, the low fat era, and that's kind of been driven into us that fat's bad, but actually it's not. The type of fat is, and where it comes from, more importantly, because there's a big difference between the fat you'll find on your piece of steak or on that roast pork or in the avocado or olives and olive oil, etc., to the fat that most people have within our diet, and that's refined vegetable oils.
Yeah.
You know, that's where things have gone wrong, particularly from that nutrition science perspective. You know, vegetable oils have to go through a huge amount of process to get them. A vegetable hasn't got oil. The seeds have oil, and that's where we get these vegetable oils from.
Right.
But to get them, it takes a lot of chemicals in most cases, high heat, which then changes their free radical content. Their omega-6 profile comes up, and often as well, bleach as well gets used because most vegetable oils, when it comes out of the process, it looks awful. There's no way you'd even want to eat it, so they have to bleach it to make it look edible.
Wow.
And funny enough, the vegetable oil, the first, if I get my numbers right, it was 1911, and it was cottonseed oil that was made, and it was made as an alternative for car engine oil.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's where it started.
We're consuming things very similar to this,
which are basically for car engines. Yeah, because it's really cheap to make, it's easy to produce, Because if you look at on the shop shelf, you could get 3 litres of sunflower oil for X amount. You're going to pay double for half the amount of olive oil.
Yes.
But again, I always say, you've got to invest in your health.
Mm.
And there's a big difference in how
Yeah.
olive oil goes into your system and this vegetable oil, and that's a big problem. That whole fat phobic side of things has come from the information that's been done using non-natural fats.
Yeah, you're right. It's marketing, and it's advertising, and it's some of the people that are behind how things are developed, which have more say, which then gets sort of fed down into the standards, the rules that we then are given by the authorities, and it's just all a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. A bit of a
bit
mess.
of a
Yes.
Yeah, just be more natural, I think, really, and real foods, as you say. Think about what we used to eat, thousands of years ago, or just 200-300 years ago, I suppose, really, as well. There was nothing that was that particularly refined in any way, was there? Even then, we would just cook something, and we'd heat it in some way so that it was better, or we'd carve it up in some way. And there was nothing else.
It's been this last post-war era. That's when things have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And then when we started to have guidelines, that's when it's gone even more wrong. And I find that incredible that we can't join the dots there. When we started to be told how to eat by our powers that be, our overall health has got worse.
Mm.
The first time in human evolution, we've been told this is how we should eat, and health outcomes are going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But like I say, if you go back just a couple of hundred years ago, the food that was available was mostly the natural food we have. Certainly, we have had agriculture for the last 10 or 12,000 years, and there's been a slow decline, actually, even with that at that point.
Mm-hmm.
From ancestral records, our bone density, muscle mass is actually less than it was prior to that.
Okay.
Since we were having, again, less nourishing foods, because grain-based food has kind of allowed us to populate the world, because again we can produce a lot of it, feeds a lot of people, and keeps us alive. But not necessarily, it doesn't help us thrive. It keeps us alive, but it doesn't necessarily help us thrive. And I think that's kind of the double-edged sword regarding agriculture. It's allowed us to become the people we are, but to the detriment of health. But then, more importantly, though, this last 50 to 80 years has been the real downward slope, and such a quick decline as well. 80 years isn't a long time, is it?
Not at all, not in the grand scheme of things. And when you think about, the demand for that, and what the animals are fed on, and what's used to grow the crops, all of that is mass marketed now. So somewhere along the line, something's either going to be missed out, or something's not being allowed to flourish in the same way. And you've only got to think about that process, really. It's just a matter of just thinking, doing a bit of research, gaining a bit of knowledge, until you realize, actually, yes, it's not what it used to be.
No. It goes to even a different level. I think even the good foods that we get now are different to what they were 100 years ago. Like you said, the processes in order to grow these things now, for example, we have to put such a lot of modern growing processes into place to get the harvest quick as we can, to get the biggest, to get the most yield from that field. And then we go down to the whole economy side of things, and how we need to make money. And we need to feed the world, and how we're growing these things are totally different.
Commercialization has a lot to answer for.
I think when we first started growing wheat 10,000-12,000 years ago, it's called einkorn. That's the first strain of wheat, and it grew around 6 or 7 feet tall. The kernels on the end, the actual grain itself, were very small, and not very many of them. But over the years, of course, of cross-pollination, what we want to do as farmers is to create more. If you look in a wheat field now, it all grows 2 or 3 foot tall. The kernels on them are really big, and there's loads of them. And it turns around, if I'm not mistaken, about 2 or 3 months. So we've actually, even that, taking wheat as a great example, has changed genetically hugely in that short space of time. I think there's, again, with a layer of, should we be eating that sort of thing? I don't know.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I don't know. And I think ultimately, you've got to do you got to do your due diligence. So you got to make sure that you do what's right for you, and you can test
Absolutely.
various things like the fasting, like what to eat at different times throughout the day, and finding something that works for you. I mean, I like bread and that sort of thing. I try my very best not to have anything, certainly 3 times throughout the day, but I try my best not to have it twice throughout the day.
Yeah.
So, for example, this morning I had, for the listeners who are going to get fed up of me saying this, but I love a bagel with an egg, avocado, a little bit of mustard, and sometimes a slice of ham if I've got some ham. So not the best, I know that, but I'm getting the good fats, I'm getting the protein, and I always start off with a cup of hot fresh lemon tea as well to cleanse my system, and I try to have a pint of water before that as well, so I'm staying very hydrated. But of course now for my lunch I'm either just going to have some meat and maybe a salad. In fact, I've got some tuna, so I'll probably have a tuna salad, so there'll be no, none of the bread or the carb aspect from the complex, is it? Complex carbs, refined carbs. Get
Simple carbs.
with carbs. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then later we've got some fish for tea. So, I try and make sure that it's as healthy as possible, but without cutting out some of the things that I know
Yeah, that you enjoy. Yeah,
I
I get
enjoy.
that.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I like bread. I do like it, but I actually prefer feeling better without it.
Well, that's the same as me.
Yeah,
And as you were saying, I mean, certainly not when I was younger, but over the last 5 years, I've come to realise that I can't have too much. For example, I know quite often we go, my partner's parents sometimes, and she's a brilliant cook, but quite often we've got something like a pie and a jacket potato, and I'm struggling. I'm struggling for that night and the next day because it's just too much in one go.
right.
But I've come to realise that, there goes the etiquette though, Dean, isn't it? I still eat it
Yes.
because it's someone else who's made it for me, but
Of
it's there
course.
in front of me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, again, there's that modern will take, isn't it?
Yeah,
You sometimes no, it's not a great choice, but you do it because of the situation.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
brilliant.
it
But yeah,
does.
comes back to full circle from however long we've been chatting. Finding what works for you as an individual.
Yeah,
Real food template. If somebody has something that isn't real food and it works and they don't feel bad, then fine. I think I said to you before, if somebody eats takeaways every single day as their main meal and they are fit and healthy, feel good, then go for it. They're
yeah.
not going to, but if that works for that individual, then fine. If they're not in a bad way,
Mm.
but yeah, that you've got to find what works for you.
You
That's the
have,
key.
yeah, yeah. And I think just paying attention to anything that doesn't feel quite right, or I'm fed up of feeling this can't be right. Because sometimes I think we get used to how we feel and that, oh, that's just the way that it is. And it's
Yep.
only when you do start, eating healthier, exercising differently, or starting something, that we actually realize, okay, I feel more energetic, or I feel, my brain fog's lifted, or whatever that might be. But yeah, I think we've got to sort of do a bit of trial and error, and yeah, see what works for us.
Yep. Take things out, put things back,
Mm.
see if that has an effect. I mean, we haven't really brushed on it, but dairy is a big one for a lot of people.
Mm.
Lactose intolerance. A lot of people are living with it without knowing it's actually a problem. Because
Yeah.
some of the uh, symptoms of it can be very minimal. You just a slow, pardon me, achy tummy all the time. Or slightly off digestion, skin conditions. They can be all kind of not really ruining somebody's day, but kind of this underlying current. And actually,
Mm.
when you take the dairy out for a few weeks, you may find these little tiny niggles go away. You may not even notice anything change, but it's then when you reintroduce these things that you'll go, oh, actually, that's interesting. That has come back. And experimenting then with what maybe some, I found some clients they can have, let's say, cheddar cheese, but they can't have milk, for
Yeah.
example. And again, that comes down to that individuality. And then we sort of micromanage where those people sit.
Mm.
Dairy is a big one for a lot of people. Don't even realise it's an issue.
No, no, I think, yeah, I've heard that, in the past for quite a number of people, and it's, yeah, but we're sold the fact that milk is a good thing. I mean, I was one of the children at school that got given the bottle of milk. When you
Right?
were a certain age, up to about 6, I think it was. Getting
Yes.
milk for your, good nails and good teeth.
Yeah, and it can be a
mm,
good source. Don't get me wrong.
mm,
If you are dairy tolerant, I'm a big fan of dairy foods. But I think you've already highlighted. The full fat versions are really important because that's actually where the goodness is.
yeah,
You start taking the fat out, you're just going to be less with basically lactose, basically sugar.
mm,
So if you are having dairy in the diet, if you can tolerate it, it can be a really good nutritional source. But make sure it's full fat.
mm,
No
yeah.
additives, none of this yogurt, not the sweetened ones, or just buy plain Greek yogurt or natural yogurt, add a bit to it yourself if you want to.
Yeah, I love Greek yogurt. Yeah. And I think, Dean, that's you've shared so much this morning. So thank you very much. And we could continue talking, I think, for a lot longer. But if we stop there, because you mentioned I forget what word you used now, but it made me think you've got a food log, haven't you, where people can log what it is that they're having.
Yeah,
Is that something that we're able to share in the show notes that people
absolutely.
can
Yes.
have
So
a go
so
at?
so feedback basically. So I'll send you over a food diary template.
Yeah.
You record everything for a week, and I will then do an assessment, and it's totally free. I can send that over and see where you are and send you some
Brilliant.
advice as well. Absolutely,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So yeah, definitely people to take Dean up on that offer, and I'll share some of the social media links and things in the show notes as well. But what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, the social media probably are the best ones. So just
Hmm.
any kind of private message me through Facebook, just under Dean Palfreyman, or my actual business as far as Primal Nutrition and Fitness UK, and that's on Instagram as well. Yeah, that's the best way to get hold of me. My website's down at the moment, hence why I haven't got the website there. And also on LinkedIn, that's the other one as well. Just find me on LinkedIn under
Yeah.
Dean Palfreyman. Send me a message and we can get together. I always offer a free consultation as well, so there's no pressure for anybody to work with me. And if they take a bit of advice away, then I'm happy, man.
Yeah, brilliant. That's can't be bad at all. That's excellent. So we'll include all of that in the show notes. And yeah, thank you very much for joining me this morning, Dean. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No problem at all. It's been really good.
Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings two of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.